Well, Spectator magazine has come up with more evidence to suggest what many of us always suspected, that there have been close ties in the past between the Labour Party and the Soviet Communist Party of the USSR. Jonathan Leftwinger joins me in the studio today to discuss this issue.
Good evening.
Mr. Leftwinger, as one of the many active Labour MPs who used to be members of the Communist Party, how can you possibly justify any links to extremism, both on the part of your party and yourself? Particularly when you consider that the likes of you are currently lambasting the British National Party more than ever on the grounds of extremism.
There's something I'd just like to set straight first.
Communism isn't true extremism. Oh no, mate. British National Party extremism, well, that's real extremism, mate, because they're racists and things like that, you know. And when I was in the Communist Party, me and other people in Labour...
And don't forget, this goes all the way up to the cabinet. So, well, there must be something noble in it if the likes of them can join the Communist Party with clear consciences.
Well, I mean, we stood for the noble ideals that communism originally represented, mate. Oh, yes, mate. We stood up for equality, fraternity, and that other one in the middle. We didn't stand up for things like the gulags and the death camps, mate. We didn't stand up for ethnic cleansing. We didn't stand up for the Berlin Wall or totalitarian oppression behind the Iron Curtain. Oh, no, mate. We were completely oblivious to that kind of thing. Although we weren't oblivious to things like the Cold War, mate. You see? Well, how could the Soviets not react by building up a fantastic nuclear arsenal and sending all their spies around the world to infiltrate everywhere? Well, I mean, they had no choice. People in the West were being so belligerent to them, weren't they? You got to extend the hand of friendship, which is that's where Labour came in.
Oh, very revealing.
Well, you know what I mean. You see, somebody had to build a bridge. You know, the Americans always said that Tony Blair was the bridge between America and Europe. And so, therefore, the likes of Harold Wilson or Michael Foot could have been a suitable bridge between the Western nations and the communist powers. I've got to tell ya.
Indeed. Although Michael Foot once successfully sued a newspaper for accusing him of being a communist, he did nevertheless have very cordial relations with the Kremlin, even going so far as to think that the concept of swapping social and policy ideas was valid. Harold Wilson's deputy even appealed to the Communist Party for support in the Labour Party's fight against the Conservatives at election time, and said that Communist Party advice was well worth listening to, although at the same time the Labour Party said they preferred to deal with Brezhnev. The Labour left has almost always been riddled with communists. In 1920, Lenin gave the Labour Party his patronage. Although he said that it wasn't left-wing enough for his tastes, it was certainly a start. And many young socialist rabble-rousers never did completely dismiss the idea of Lenin and Marx as being valuable catalysts to their own dogma. The Labour cabinet itself in recent years has seen many ex-Communist Party members lead the country. On that list includes the names Peter Mandelson, David Blunkett, who flew the red flag outside of Sheffield Council when he was there, Peter Hain, and Charles Clarke, who was one of the ones who flew to a junket with Castro for a love-in in 1978, along with the likes of Ken Livingstone and many people who are now big in the trade unions over here. Talking of trade unions, Jack Jones was a spy for the KGB for 45 years, and there have always been suspicions that Harold Wilson had more than a little involvement in that sort of thing. Derek Simpson, boss of the Transport and General Workers Union, never left the Communist Party to join Labour until he was 49 years old. He enjoys regular flights and junkets to Cuba even today, the latest big one being to take advice from Castro on human rights issues, Laughable indeed when you consider that Castro's Cuba always was a bastion of old-school Soviet communism.
There's no need to go any further. You're twisting everything out of all proportion.
And Trevor Phillips, boss of the Labour-employed Commission for Racial Equality, always likes to boast that he used to have a bust of Lenin on his desk to inspire him.
Wow, it's better than... I suppose if he'd have had a bust of Hitler on his desk, you'd have been happy.
I'd be happy if there were no bloody communists in Labour or on the left, and it's not just big wheels in Labour. You remember Militant's tendency, don't you?
Oh yes, militant tendency, gallant freedom fighters. Oh, you see, fighting on the streets of Liverpool for Labour supremacy in the council chambers, mate, against the fascism of Margaret Thatcher. So now we know who the real extremists are, don't we, mate? Dismantling British industry. That's Labour's job.
You've twisted yourself into many circles in the past, but this one is hard to bear. How is it Labour's responsibility to dismantle an industry? I thought the socialists were supposed to be protective of their people.
I mean, well, I used to be in the old days until the chief whip got hold of it. Well, discussions with... Well, you see, times change. And you've got to change with them. Oh, yes, mate, but at least I'm still allowed to be politically correct. Oh, yes, mate. And in my capacity as a sub-Marxist, politically correct Labour Party operative, I shall make up for the ground that I've lost in not being allowed to be an economic socialist anymore. And be ever more oppressive of the British people in my constituency. In the ethical Marxist arena instead, mate. I beg you not to take this little avenue of enjoyment away from me. I'll be left with nothing otherwise.
Oh, Jonathan.
How many times do I have to keep telling the likes of you, as does many other people in the left, that just because many people in the Labour Party used to be communists doesn't mean to say they're actually Stalinists. I've got to tell ya, I keep on saying that just because there have been no communist regimes in the world which properly represent the original ideas of Marx and Lenin doesn't mean to say that there's not... Good communist regimes are still left to come. And so we got to approach the whole idea with an open mind. What do you say, public?
Oh, so you lived schizoid existences then, completely oblivious to the real-life consequences of having communists in the world.
You see, I explain things to you, but you just don't listen. That's why the likes of I treat the likes of you with complete and total contempt.
Now you have to admit that, if nothing else, is a positive legacy of communism, mate.
Where the rulers don't...
You're just like Diane Abbott, one of many middle-class Trotskyites who supported many race and class rioters causing all sorts of trouble on the streets of Britain, just because they opposed Margaret Thatcher and capitalism in general.
Well, I mean, somebody had to.
And this despite the fact that the likes of you and Diane Abbott are yourselves rolling in money. Not very communistic, is it?
Well, it's called class, and I know people in the left usually like to say that there should be no such thing as class, but as has been demonstrated in the past, the only type of real upper class there should be are people from the left, mate, because they know how to invest their money in persons of a suitable left-wing persuasion, who can help run the country as it needs rather than what it wants, mate. And it just so happens to be people like us, coincidentally. Well, it makes one thing a bit easier about ruling over the country today, isn't it, mate? Vote Labour! Or at least somebody from the left. You can't have the BNP, mate. They're far too extreme.
You elitist red shitbag.
Yes, mate, yes. Say it again. See you later.